Howard Beck, one of the best, senior NBA writer for The Ringer. What's up, man? How we doing?
Good morning, GD. How are you?
I'm well, especially since I get to do one of my favorite things, which is rail against officials. It's one of my favorite things, except for when it goes too far, right? When it becomes an issue where I say, actually, you got to figure this out. And I thought that after the Giannis ejection, that things would change materially in the NBA in terms of the way that stars were officiated or at least ejected. And I saw the Jokic one and I went, okay, maybe without the context of what has already happened this year, this is kind of a nothing situation. But are you concerned at all with just this trend of more ejections for stars? Or I don't even actually know if it's more ejections because maybe there's no actual number to back that up. But the way that some of these superstars are being ejected in an era where we're asking people to care more and more about the regular season, but most people aren't feeling that way.
So not concerned, not convinced it's a trend.
Okay.
And not convinced that everybody is actually concerned with the right thing here. So let's start with this. There's a contradiction in the minds of a lot of folks, fans and media, like when watching the NBA, when it comes to how stars are officiated. Because if they get ejected like that, you say, how can you do that? But if they get a pass, then it's, these guys are treated differently and get more deference, and they shouldn't. That's not right, especially if you're the team that does not have the star and you want the other team to be disadvantaged by it. So there's that. The other thing is, when people are reacting in real time, and I saw a lot of this on Twitter last night, and I've seen it at other times, people are often reacting in real time based on just the gut reaction to, oh my gosh, I can't even believe they did this. How is this even justified? Mm-hmm. We don't have a microphone on the player and the referee. And now sometimes we did not get a pool report last night, but sometimes and frequently lately, and this is to the league's credit, that we get this kind of transparency where they allow pool reporters even for things as simple as, why was this guy ejected? The answer usually when the coach or a player is ejected, and if we do get the pool report and the reporter asks the referee, so what happened? Why did he get the tee? Why did he get the second tee? Almost every time it's because they said one of the magic words, that you can't attack the referees. You can't say certain words to them. You can't question their integrity. Those are rules that everybody knows. If you do it, you get a tech. If you do it twice, you're gone. And like that, I don't know why we're blaming the officials for that. The referees have a job to do, and they are scrutinized to the nth degree by their superiors at the NBA. And if they let stuff go, if they don't call it the way it's supposed to be, if they say, it's the last 2 minutes of the game and I don't want to disadvantage this team because it's a tight game, this is a star, and they make the opposite call or don't make the call for the wrong reason, they're going to hear about it the next day because everything they do is reviewed and evaluated. And if they missed something, it's there. If they decided to let something go that they shouldn't have, it's there, and they get graded on it.
I think it's interesting right now that players feel like I was listening to Andre Iguodala talk about this, who is, one of the bigger voices now in the NBA, about how his number one gripe, and that after he retired, was that he feels like officials insert themselves too often in games, that they don't just call the game, that they are still, and this is a smart guy. This is not someone who I'm like, this is just a dude. Like it would be one thing if this was like coming from Draymond, right? Where it's like him on his podcast or Patrick Beverley, he's trying to make noise. And I'm like, okay. When I heard Andrew Iguodala say it, I went, okay, this is something to note. And I do feel that way a little bit with the league right now. And you're right. I agree. They have a job to do. I think that actually maybe, even just hearing you talk about this, one of my bigger issues is more to do with just the league itself, how I didn't really think about players getting ejected before fairly recently, but now they've done these things to try to curb load management, right? Where they've said, hey, enough is enough. We need to make sure that these stars are on the floor. These tickets are expensive. There's only a couple of dates where these guys are actually in other arenas. We want to make sure that, because if we're going to market the product as the stars are playing in these games, that the stars are actually playing in them. I think it makes it a little difficult as a consumer when you're saying, hey, the regular season still matters. We've got this in-season tournament. Hey, we're trying to make guys not play. And then the bar for dismissal feels a little bit low for some of these superstars. You're right. The magic word, the officials, like I definitely hear that part of it. But there is it does feel like a conflicting message from the league with the officiating at times.
Yeah, I mean, listen, just to make the distinction here, one is a league policy that is trying to rein in a trend that's been going on for several years where players aren't playing as often as they used to, and the league would like them to play more games and more minutes of more games and all that. That's a policy matter. An officiating matter is something else entirely. The officials are supposed to officiate the game in a consistent manner The rules are the rules. And if a guy steps over the line and earns a tech, you're not supposed to just swallow the whistle. You're supposed to give him the tech. Now, listen, the referees take a lot of abuse, and there's a certain amount that they probably do just let go. But there's a limit. I don't want to go too far here. I don't know what was said or was not said to earn an ejection so early in the game that Michael Malone and Jokic both got. Was the refereeing crew just a little edgy themselves last night? Were they too quick to call the T's? It's possible. I don't know. And nobody else does either. So when folks are reacting really, adamantly about this, all I can say is, like, we all need to take a deep breath. We don't really know what happened, and that's often the case in these cases. The other thing, I just real quick on this, Giannis, when he got ejected for the taunt. Yeah, I mean, listen, that's a more subjective thing in the moment. How long do you have to stare at a guy that you just dunked on before it's considered a taunt? Or is the too small thing? I don't think he got tossed for the too small thing. I think he got tossed for the initial, like, he came down and just, like, stared at the guy. But the league is, listen, we know the history of the NBA. From the moment the NBA 20 years ago or whatever started trying to tamp down on fights and all this, all the kind of just, nastier parts of the game, they have had a low tolerance for anything that they think might lead to conflict. Guys don't fight anymore, so they shouldn't, maybe they should reevaluate it all. But Monty McCutcheon, the head of officiating, actually gave an interview to my buddy Vinny Goodwill over at Yahoo.
Yeah, I read it.
A week or so ago. Yeah, and he said, like, listen, we find that historically, taunting and stare downs and everything eventually lead to other tensions, and then stuff boils over, and we're trying to nip that stuff in the bud. And that's fair. That's the history of the league. So I get it, but no, nobody wants to see Giannis ejected for what seemed like a very trivial gesture that night.
My thing there is, first of all, Monty, release the reports. Like, I want to see this, because this feels like, it turns out that we got these studies we were working on, and that's that we got to make sure that these guys. The other part is, I couldn't wait for, and to support him, though, and I brought this up, I was like, damn, this hurts because this did. I couldn't wait for that second Warriors-Timberwolves game the other night because why? Because of the way that Draymond and Edwards were jawing at each other at the free throw line late in the game, and that we had already had the history of Edwards saying, hey, like, I hate them because they talk so much, and then waiting for the next game, feeling like there were stakes, feeling like I am going to get a moment like that where the players are staring each other down. And because it usually is under the idea that there is no more fighting in the NBA anymore, right? Like, who was it? It was the Kermit Washington punch, right? That Tom Janovich breaks somebody's jaw and like almost kills somebody, and so the league goes, all right, no more fighting. We got to get rid of this. There was like a lot of fighting in the NBA. Can't have Larry Bird out here scrapping anymore. But now it's like, the biggest fight we get is this fake, Draymond Green grabbing Rudy Gobert on the neck, where most of us go, he's fine. Nobody ends up getting hurt here. And they can't have another malice. They can't have another real violent incident. But I do feel like if we're getting to the point where we think, hey, we're preventing this by ejecting Giannis because he stared someone down, maybe, just maybe, we're going a little too far and we should be evaluating these refs a little bit differently. That's all. That's my thought. But let's keep it moving. Okay, so I want to have you on because I want to talk to you about Kawhi, and I want to talk to you about the Clippers. Because we had this, like, man, a long stretch where we were talking about the Clippers, and what a disastrous trade, and bringing Harden, he's a loser, and all this different, like, why did they do this in the arena and all this different stuff? And there's a lot of downside, right? Like, there's a big risk. There's also a big reward, and we've seen just like the last couple of games, Harden with a big step back that hits late in the game, the respect that he clearly has from his peers, Westbrook going to the bench. There's at least some more signs that this is going to be positive. But I'm curious what you think about Kawhi's part in this, because he's won twice with two different teams, one of which it's just like irrefutable with the Raptors, where he was the best player on the championship team and he carried them to a title almost single-handedly through rounds. Not one where you can just say, hey, like, that's a Spurs title. He played with a bunch of Hall of Famers and a Hall of Fame coach. But when he went there was this real buzz of, hey, maybe this guy's going to be the best player in the league right now. And then he sat and he took load management to a point where it basically broke the league, where they needed to change their rules. They've had no success there. He's had limited playoff success, nothing close to what they had kind of hoped for. And now they're in the spot where it kind of feels like an all-in year, and he's got a contract negotiation coming up. And I wonder if you think if this thing goes as poorly as some people predict, right, where the Clippers flame out and they're just in this impossible position. If this is any way going to damage or really change the way that you look back on Kawhi Leonard's career when it's all said and done.
I don't know if it'll change my view of his career, but I wrote this recently on The Ringer when I was writing about Harden after he got the trade to the Clippers, in that there's a difference between your career accomplishments and your quote-unquote legacy. So the accomplishments are the things we can't take away from you, right? Kawhi Leonard, 2-time Finals MVP. James Harden, multiple-time scoring champion, and a billion other stats of note in the course of his career, and all NBA teams, and an MVP in the regular season, all that. Those are the things we can't take away from you. But legacy is kind of the way you're perceived. It's kind of how we all talk about your accomplishments. And in James Harden's case, like, the legacy is the guy sours on teams every 12 to 13 months and keeps bouncing around, forcing trades and wreaking havoc, and not really conducting himself in an honorable way along the way. So with Harden, it's hard for him to ever overcome the fact that we just look at him through a jaded lens now. With Kawhi, look, the two championships and finals MVPs insulate him to a degree, and because there was nothing to dislike. There was really nothing to criticize along the way as he led the Spurs and then the Raptors to championships. And really nothing to even, be mad about when he left Toronto for LA as a free agent, right? The games played and injury stuff gets murky because, again, I'm gonna play the same card I played on our referee discussion.
Yeah,
there's a lot we don't know.
Yeah,
there's a lot we still don't really understand or have the full story of what happened between Kawhi Leonard and the Spurs in the first place. Remember, he soured on them and wanted to be traded because of injury and health management issues, because there was a difference of opinion between him and the team about what he could or could not do with what had become a chronic condition, and I think is a chronic condition now. And as I understood it during his time with Toronto, that was the thing. It wasn't that he did not want to play, or this wasn't like player rest. This was, he has a condition that's not going away. Now, he had, again, you and I are not medical professionals, but he had an ACL tear, now 2 seasons ago. Or a couple of years ago, that cost him an entire season. Was that a result of the other issues that he's had ongoing ever since San Antonio? Maybe. And then in the wake of that, he hasn't played full seasons. But again, came back from an ACL, and he's still in the other condition, the name of which I cannot remember anymore.
Yeah, no one can. Don't worry. I don't think he remembers, so it's fine.
Yeah, he probably doesn't. But it hasn't gone away. So all I'm saying is, he's a really, really talented, great player. And a really, really frustrating player. And the combination of him having gone through what he's done and the lack of consistent play or consistently being available, combined with Paul George, his teammate, also having been injured a lot and load managed a lot, it just creates a picture where, again, legacy. How do we remember somebody? Well, how we'll remember this team, this Clipper era of the last 4 years and running here. We'll always talk about it as, you remember when they got those 2 all-NBA wings who were great two-way players together and couldn't get anywhere and never won it all, never even had a chance to, and they never played or they didn't play out. That will be the conversation for years to come in the way we remember that team.
Yeah. Okay. So to expand on this, I agree with you about the injury stuff, right? It's really hard. It kind of gets to the same thing we were talking about earlier, which is like, hey, where do you give the benefit of the doubt? And I guess there are certain times where I don't give Kawhi the full benefit of the doubt when it's been some of the load management in the past. And maybe that's unfair because you're correct in stating I'm not a doctor. If I was, I certainly wouldn't be here. Like I'd be doing some great stuff. But I think the thing with me is when this happened, everyone went, okay, Harden's legacy, it's so important because if he could win, he changes so much. And if he loses and he ends up being a malcontent, like, you're right, that is his legacy. It's cemented. We're going to remember him more as a malcontent than as one of the greatest scorers in league history, right? I think Zach Lowe dubbed him, Karl Malone, modern-day Karl Malone, with the stats, where we'll look back and say, oh, it's great. But it's such a big trade request history, such a malcontent history now that I do think that's going to be at the very top. And then same kind of goes for Russell Westbrook, where his legacy in this is very, very obvious. Like a guy that people said, hey, he's a great player, but can you win with him? And now he's trying to do things like go to the bench. He's trying to make this thing work. He wants to be there. He wants to be in a winning situation. He's been mostly really, really good for them, right? So his is clear. Paul George, same thing. Like really, really good player. If he wins a championship, we'll remember him differently. Kawhi, you're right. He was insulated. He had these things. And the injury stuff, you're right. I don't think that we can nitpick at it too much because some of it even here was like stuff of lore, right? When he won with Toronto and it was just no one else was helping him and he was kind of limping around after some of these dunks, we went, man, this guy's such a gamer. He's even playing through these injuries when the chips are down. The question I have is like the actual I believe like teams often take on the personality of their best player, right? Or that we criticize the best player on the team and say, hey, like, why didn't this thing work? And then you see stuff like when the Clippers break up the team to make Kawhi happen the first time and how he's treated differently. And the arriving to the arena at different times, kind of at his leisure, the planes waiting for him, the star treatment that he gets with the Clippers that's different with some of the players. And, yeah, just the lack of accountability. Even Lou Williams feeling like he could go out the other day and say, hey, when his team got to the bubble, they didn't really feel like it was worth anything because people were kind of talking down on it. Just there seems to be at least – and then even bringing in James Harden where it's like, hey, they've got a good thing going. Let's just see it. And Kawhi is the team's best player going, no, let's bring in the malcontent. Don't worry, we'll make it work because it's just like, I wonder if you think that he owns any part of this in the lack of success. Like beyond the injuries, the actual team culture that's around the Clippers, if this is just a fully enabled team because of Steve Ballmer and his pursuit of just selling this arena and having an exciting team, or like where you think Kawhi's part of that is?
Well, in this league, we generally start with the blame game. We generally start with the superstar, right? Like if you're a player of a certain caliber and your team fails, you know, like, look, there are times where we'll say, you know what, front office didn't get him enough help, or he never had that second star. That's not the case in this example. Sometimes it's that. But this is one of those cases where from the moment he got there with Paul George, it's like, okay, you've got your 1-2 punch from day one.
Yep.
And then can you surround them with the right supporting cast? Well, we have praised them every year for having great depth. We talked about them over the last couple of years. It's like, best depth in the league, best depth in the league.
So many on-paper championships for the Clippers these past couple of years. So many on-paper championships. And so there's really nothing there where you can say this is a team that failed the star. That's not the case. That's not the case. The star has not been available. The stars have not aligned, I guess, in this regard. But I don't. All the other stuff, right? The team culture stuff, the rules are bent, everything else, like that happens almost everywhere else. All it means is you can't blame the franchise for not doing what Kawhi Leonard thought he needed, right? Mm-hmm. And they've got a great coach in Tyronn Lue. They've had for years running here, I think, one of the smarter, savvier front offices. It doesn't mean that every decision has been correct. And I'm not sure the James Harden move was really the wisest play right now, but I also get it. You're already all in on this group, and the clock is ticking. And, you know, Paul George and Kawhi Leonard are going to be free agents at the end of the season if you don't sign them to extensions before then. And, you know, it's kind of like now or never. Mm-hmm. You're already all in. So they're doubling down and tripling down. And I don't know how this is ultimately going to work out. They seem to be starting to settle in with the last couple of wins. And James Harden, look, the guy still led the league in assists last season and played a really efficient supporting role alongside Joel Embiid. There's a lot about Harden not to like, but the guy is still really talented and an impactful player. And, you know, in combination with Paul George and Kawhi Leonard, if Harden is satisfied to play, you know, that tertiary role basically and not demand to be the leading scorer every night, then, you know, there's a lot they can do. Can they knock out the Nuggets or any of the other teams that are at the top there in the West? I don't know. I've got my doubts, but the Clippers have the talent to still do something. The on-paper thing still exists. Yes, the on-paper thing 100% exists. Here's my Clippers prediction. At some point this year, they will tear off a bunch of wins in a row, and people are going to go, are they true contenders? And then they're going to get into the postseason, and it's going to be like maybe it's Denver. They hope it's Denver because if it's Denver, then at least they can just say, well, you know, that's the best team in the league, and what are we supposed to do? Nobody can guard Jokic. Like, it is what it is. But I feel like they have another meltdown. That it gets to push comes to shove, and yeah, the Harden thing, that's where it really pops up.
in the past, it's been Clipper meltdowns. In this case, if you are going up against the defending champions, like nobody has an answer for Jokic yet. And, who knows? Maybe there's more reinforcements on the way. Maybe there's another trade they make before the deadline. Maybe they find a big man who can fluster Jokic a little bit. I don't know. I will say this. To the extent that the Clippers have a kind of messy postseason history in this era, to the extent that James Harden has a messy postseason history for his entire career, the good news is, if everybody's healthy and available, Kawhi Leonard is a clutch player.
Yep.
We have seen that. Kawhi Leonard is a two-time Finals MVP for a reason, and Paul George is really good, and James Harden, for once, doesn't have to do it all himself.
Yeah.
And so if they fail, maybe it won't be because of him. Now, maybe it will. Maybe it still is at 2 for 18 by James Harden. But I'm just saying this is a case where, again, if he is satisfied and content to be the guy who sets up these other two incredible stars, then he doesn't have to try to win a series. He won't. He doesn't have to fade in the moment if the moment belongs to somebody else.
Just thinking about Jokic, because watching him dominate them the other night, where it's incredible, right? He's completely unstoppable. And the way that team shares the basketball, even without Jamal Murray, right? Like just that, it's weird actually, because I saw a stat, Michael Porter Jr. has no assists in like his last 3 games or something. He's just the one guy on the team that refuses to play a part in the ball movement culture that they've set there. But I saw this clip. This is a little off tangent, but I saw this clip. I think it was Paul Pierce. I'm not 100% sure, but he said that he believes that the gap between Jokic and the next best player is as great as when LeBron was at his very peak. And I sat there with it and I went, there's just no way. Because I don't think that the case is, hey, he's as great as LeBron was in his peak. But do you think there's some truth to that? Because I'm watching Jokic as often as I can right now, and I do feel like there has been this kind of awakening to it after the finals, with just what he's doing in the regular season right now. Like, it used to be that we would see his numbers and people go like, yeah, we get it. But now that he's won a championship and everybody saw him do it, right? Down to the last casual. And now we're looking at some of these stat lines and just the way that he can take over a game and the way that he can close it like he did against the Clippers last week. And I do feel like there's just this sort of, I don't know, his stature has obviously changed. But do you think there's any truth to the Paul Pierce statement? Because I went, maybe there is something to this.
This is an imperfect measure, but, Basketball Reference has the MVP tracker it's based on an algorithm that is fed by how everybody else has won an MVP award before. So it's a probability of a guy winning the MVP based on the history of the award and how other guys have won it. Jokic right now is the favorite with a probability of 45%, and the drop-off from him to Joel Embiid is pretty steep. Joel Embiid is at 31%. So if that speaks at all to the distance between Jokic and the rest of the field, maybe. Listen, it's early in the season. These numbers are based on,
Sure.
small sample size. I don't know if I agree with Pierce on that. I would just say, because there's a bunch of really great players, right? Like,
sure.
Joel Embiid is having an incredible season. Giannis, it's been a little up and down in Milwaukee with integrating Damian Lillard and getting used to other new supporting cast members and just, a lot of change there. But Giannis is still an incredible player. And, Jason Tatum is having a pretty fantastic season in Boston. Like, there's a bunch of great players, and Shai Gilgeous-Alexander is incredible. Like, is the gap between Jokic and them the same as LeBron to the field? I don't like even when we talk about that. I mean, how many different years were there in the back half, I guess, of LeBron's career where it was maybe Steph has surpassed him, maybe Kawhi has surpassed him, maybe Kevin Durant has surpassed.
Yeah.
Like, there were always other Hall of Fame caliber players who were doing incredible things, who were at least worth discussing, and who, depending on which talking head was talking, somebody might proclaim a guy the new face of the league. Jokic is really great, and he's so unique that it's hard to make comparisons.
That's it. To me, the reason why I really entertain the thought is it's just like the Nash effect, right? Where it felt like you could put any player around Steve Nash and they were instantly going to become more of a household name, and you go, I trust this player. And then if they ended up somewhere else, I'm like, oh yeah, this dude would be completely lost in the shuffle. And again, Milwaukee's trying to figure things out. Their team, they've had a really tough hand just with their depth and the team that they have and the continuity, all these different things. I think they'll be fine. Giannis is still dominant, all those things. Joel Embiid, same thing, just in terms of take over a basketball game, one of the best players in the league, defensively, just everything, right? It's all there. But I just feel like Jokic, you drop in on any team, essentially, and a couple of weeks later, we're talking about these guys being like, wow, this dude's really good. Look at how much better he's made this player. And to me, that's the value. And that was part of LeBron's value too, right? Is the playmaking element, just the ability to elevate the others around you. I don't remember a guy quite like Jokic since maybe Nash, where I just felt like, yep, just put whoever on the floor. Just put whoever on the floor, and he's going to make it work, and he's still going to be able to dominate this way. And that's why I think it's at least closer. Okay, so now a guy I don't feel that way about. Everybody's talking about Zach Lavine because he wants out. And even your guys, Danny Chow, he outlined a strong case, again, on paper. He wants the Raptors to try to challenge the Clippers in the on-paper championship. But, yeah, on paper, just the fit for the Raptors. But I don't know. I guess I'm in the minority here on this because I thought I wouldn't be, but I'm not a huge Lavine guy. Like, I get it, just the ability, but there's really no track record of winning. I don't love it when a guy starts asking out of the spot. His coach said it's about winning or whatever, but yeah, just to me, this is someone who has a lot of the same concern that you would have bringing in Harden, which is like a heliocentric player that I think is going to basically change the way that you play. How do you see this thing playing out? Is there a place that you actually really love the fit? Do you think that the Raptors are actually a destination that should be serious for him? Like, where are you at with Lavine?
I'll start with the Toronto aspect of it. I don't agree with my colleague Danny Chow, who's great at his job and wrote a really nice piece that people should go read.
Yeah, it is.
But I wouldn't put Toronto on the list. Mostly not for anything to do with Zach Lavine, but more to do with the Raptors. Like, I don't know what the Raptors are or what they're doing, where they're going.
Welcome to the ever-growing club. Yes.
Yeah. So they're in a weird still, like they're in year 3 of this weird in-between phase where it's not exactly clear what the direction is or what they have to build around. I mean, obviously they're building around Scotty Barnes, but like, is Siakam there for the long haul or isn't he? Is OG Anunoby there for the long haul or isn't he? Is this a rebuild? Is this a retool on the fly, which is kind of how they approached it initially? But, now, Van Vliet's gone and like all these pieces keep kind of falling away. So I don't have a strong sense of what the near-term agenda is, and therefore you don't know what the timeline is, right? So Scotty Barnes is 22 and Zach Lavine's 28, 29, I think. So it's not impossible to put them on the same timeline and say like this is our 1-2 punch, but I don't know that Zach Lavine is the right counterpart there. But I also think that it makes more sense to not be adding $40 million a year, veterans with long-term contracts. It makes more sense to keep accumulating guys who are in their early 20s to build around Scotty Barnes and let this thing have a long shelf life. So no, I don't see that. Where Zach Lavine does fit, I mean, to your point, yeah, we always are suspicious in this league of guys who put up big numbers on losing teams year after year. Fine, fair. Sometimes it's on the guy and sometimes it's not. Sometimes they're simply a guy who's been miscast as a number 1 because of the stats they can put up, but they'd really be better off as a number 2 or number 3, right? Like, Chris Bosh was a lot better player playing next to LeBron and Dwayne Wade. Statistically, he wasn't. But in terms of his success, he was. And Bosh could lead a team as a number 1. And he did very well for years, but it wasn't going to be enough. So Zach Lavine next to, I don't know, LeBron in L.A.
That works.
Put him next to LeBron and Anthony Davis. I think you've got something. Put him next to Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. I think you've got something. So I think he makes more sense in that kind of role. The difficulty is that, again, he's making $40 million this year, and it keeps going up from there. And it's really hard to make a trade. So there's no guarantee he even gets traded this season.
Yeah. I liked all that. To the Raptors' point, I feel for the people that have to cover the team on a daily basis because they're tired of having the what is the direction, what is the next move conversation, right? Like, they're like, can we just enjoy the one game? Can we just enjoy the tight contest against the Celtics on a Friday? Can we enjoy, hopefully a win over the Orlando Magic in the in-season tournament game? I get it. But you're right. It's 3 years of this, and they're so weird that they're a team that you can go, hey, they'll trade for Zach Lavine in a piece, or they'll trade away Siakam in the next piece and go with a complete rebuild. And it's just, at some point, they've got to choose one of these doors. And given how much more obvious Scotty Barnes seems to be making it, which is, hey, I'm really good and I'm super young, and maybe let's be patient with our young coach and try to rebuild this thing properly, that's the direction they take. It's so against what Masai has done in terms of taking those, we just really haven't seen him take those steps backwards in a really long time. It's hard for me to kind of see it. But and like they have to decide this year. Like it has to happen this season with Siakam. It has to happen this season with OG Anunoby. It's wild that all the people who are best at their job and the most plugged in people in the NBA, people who cover it as well and as long as like guys like you have, we're all kind of like, you're all sitting there going, we're not really exactly sure what the hell they're going to do.
Yeah. I'm surprised to have come to this point myself.
Yeah.
Because I have incredibly high respect for Masai Ujiri, Bobby Webster, and the rest of that group. They've done an incredible job over the years. And the last couple of years, I've been sort of puzzled, as I think, all of your listeners probably have been, by it's just not that in general, as I've covered the league over the years, I think it's not so much whether a team is winning or losing. It's often more a matter of, do I have a strong sense of what they're trying to accomplish, right? And sometimes you have a lull where like it is vague for a while and it's not clear, and then it kind of comes into focus eventually. This is one of those cases though where it's like I just don't get a sense that there's a clear, strong direction, or a conviction of what they want to do and where they're headed or what they're trying to accomplish, and it's. I'll say this, though. I would prefer sort of the ambiguity there. And listen, in the wake of having won a title in the recent history and having a good track record and still reason to have faith in that group, I would take that over, say, the Bulls going all in on a trio of guys that never were going to be able to break through, that had a hard ceiling on them, right? And now they're going to start tearing it down. That's worse. Because that was a plan, that was a road to nowhere. That was a plan that had a ceiling built in from day one when you got Vucevic, DeRozan, and Lavine together. Like that was, you were never going to build a great defense around that team. They were always going to be a first round and out playoff team at best. And, now it's pretty much already over. Yeah,
that was what was so weird about the Raptors essentially being in on the Damian Lillard rumors. So this felt like the going all in on a team that also had a ceiling. That wasn't going to be able to win a championship this season. And so, I don't know. I'm with you. There are times where I go, they've definitely still got a plan, because I agree. I have the same respect for Masai. I have all that different, the front office is so smart. But a lot of times to me, it just feels like they're just hoping for something to happen. Like they're hoping for another Kawhi Leonard situation where a team goes, we refuse to send this guy to L.A., and so we want to send him as far away from L.A. as possible. Will you take him? And the Raptors go, yeah, and we'll do this on the cheap, and we'll make a run at it. Like that, there isn't the plan is to not have a plan. they're Seinfeld. Like that's what they're hoping for here. Anyway, Howard, I always appreciate the chats, man. Thanks for doing this today. It was really fun.
Yeah, always a pleasure. Thanks.
Take care, man. Howard Beck, senior NBA writer for The Ringer. Again, there's tons of great stuff up on the site right now. Recommend people go and check it out and go and read it.